Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cannabis Marketing Live. I am your host, Jake Litke, the CEO at MediaGel. And today we have Shabazz, who is joining us from Blaze and some other storied companies. We'll get into that. Today we're going to be talking about retention in general, but more specifically, how you manage retention after large events. In this case, 420, but there are other events in retail that have a similar type of spike like Black Friday and other things. Um, Shabazz, thanks for taking some time today to spend with us. Let's start with just a quick, actually, this is kind of usually how I start all these conversations, which is how did you find yourself in the cannabis industry? I know you had a career prior to that, and I'm curious as to what that looked like for you. Everyone has a slightly different version of that.
Absolutely. I just want to say thanks for having me on the pod, and thanks to Courtney for tracking me down and working with me. Appreciate you both having me. Cannabis industry, can't believe it's already been 8 years in this space, or 7.5.
Mhm.
And the way I got into it was twofold. So, number one, I've genuinely always been interested in cannabis. Growing up, I was an athlete and also worked in sales at Salesforce. And everyone could drink before games or after work, whatever the case is, but no one could ever, just smoke a J, which I thought was crazy. And then simultaneously, while I was at Salesforce, a buddy of mine who I went to school with at Western, he he got this job at this company called Lift and Co. And at the time, crypto was hot. Cannabis was hot. Cannabis stocks were going off. Aurora, Canopy, everyone was there was a lot of zero interest rates. There's just a time of a time different from now, I'd say.
Yeah.
And medical cannabis was big in Canada, and I was contemplating a move away from Salesforce, and it was crypto or cannabis for me. I like both. I believe in both. And I ended up getting this job as the head of sales at Lift and Co. And Lift and Co was interesting. They started off as a event business.
Mhm.
But what they really, that was their B2B side, but what they really were they were like effectively a Yelp or like a Google reviews for medicinal cannabis, because in Canada you had the medical cannabis side of things, and everyone was getting all these all this different type of flower and oils and things. I don't actually think it was flowers, oils, but like no one was actually writing about it. No one actually knew, and so Lyft became this amazing website with like 100,000 visitors, that was built for the medical space. Then we built a trade show. So best way to describe it is like the MJ Business Canada. And it was a consumer day, and it was a VIP B2B day, and then it was like kind of like a brand day. So it was like the first of its kind. This was 7.5 years ago. Yeah, and that's how I got into cannabis, which is crazy.
Yeah, so 8 years. So that's like 2018. That's when I got in the cannabis space as well.
Wow. Tell what
Yeah.
I don't even know how you got into it. Tell me your story.
Well, my background is building technology platforms around advertising, mobile, geodata, that kind of stuff. And I just intersected with someone who was an early investor in some of the Canadian LPs, and
Nice.
they were trying to build some products in the cannabis space. And to make a conversation short, we basically realized that there were no good advertising tools or distribution for cannabis brands or retailers. And so we decided that we were going to build a platform to do that, um, which turned out to be hard to
Hmm.
do.
Yeah.
But we're still here, and we've kind of gone through all the cycles as a business along with the industry. Um, I think things are in many ways the best they've been. I
Hmm.
know that it's still very, very difficult to operate. And we've seen the cycles in the different states of, sort of the early heady days of everyone getting licenses and getting excited, and then too many retailers or too many brands and pruning and all of that. But we work with a lot of companies, MSOs that are running pretty good businesses right now.
Yeah.
They're growing. There's a lot of interesting consolidation happening, which I think is, there's pros and cons to that, but overall is kind of good for the market. And I think it's an exciting time to be in cannabis.
I agree. I totally agree. I think the beauty of what you just said is that number one, you it forces you to be an expert in, and figure out where to play, when to play, and who to play with. Like the fact that there's so much compliance in each state so different makes you so deadly because of your knowledge capital. Like people need to be able to work with you. And the second thing is like you see all these patterns, and it's like these markets follow such similar patterns. It's
Yeah.
almost like seeing the future, right? It's almost like having a cheat code in a way. I was just in Europe, and a lot of the similar cycles, a lot of opportunity though. And so I think the benefit is figuring out where to find that opportunity because there's like this arbitrage associated with it. But yeah, I agree with you, man. Great time to be in cannabis. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Should have started now, not 8 years ago, but we are where we are. It's been
I
a fun
mean,
ride though.
dude, think about how much you know, though.
Yeah.
Like think about the barrier to entry. Like for such a young industry, the barrier to entry is challenging, right? It's like, what would you tell? If someone, I'm sure many people ask you about your opinion about the industry, about, jobs in this industry, economic viability.
Yeah.
Like, if I was trying to get a job in this industry, what would you tell me kind of thing? Like, how would I get a job in this space out of curiosity?
Well, I mean, that's a pretty broad question, right? Because it's like it is an entire industry. That's like kind of saying, because there's so many layers. You're
Yeah.
from grower to like social media marketer. Those are like totally different careers.
Yeah.
Um, and
Totally.
but I would,
That's the beauty of it.
but like broadly, I would say the biggest thing to look at is what the organization is like that you're going to work for and where they're at
Mhm.
in the market.
Great.
I think you still see a lot of there's still some strong single operators out there that have a good business, have a good market. Operators, a lot of the single operators have fallen off that maybe didn't have the right operational discipline. And then you've got a pretty interesting chess game going on, or maybe more of a risk board than a chess game in the
Mhm.
US going on with acquisitions of MSOs and
Yeah, big news
companies that
today.
everyone thought were going to be the big hitters, going through receivership, and then other companies coming out that are scooping up assets that people didn't expect necessarily. So uh it's like being, in Game of Thrones.
It is, and some big news obviously coming out today with Vireo acquiring Fluent
Fluent.
and all
Yeah.
stock deal. So Dave Vautrin, their Fluent CEO, he's a good friend, and he's in this group I run called the Cannabis Collective,
Okay.
which is a group in New York, like executive leaders. Also, you should come to some of the events we're throwing. Love to have you. But it's
Sure.
like it's cool to be in an industry and in a position where that news hits and like a guy you built a relationship with, the CEO of that company who just got acquired and is
Yeah.
like texting you, and we're breaking the news on this. So I host this talk show called Coffee with the Collective at 9 a.m. Every other Thursday.
Okay.
And we broke the news on there. And like Dave was a founding member. He's one of the reasons why Cannabis Collective like actually got legitimacy. And so then to see like that's a second exit because his first one was from Origin House. It's like that's what's also like this industry is hard as fuck. Don't get me wrong, but it's amazing and that you get
Yeah.
to be so close to it. It would take the reason I left Salesforce is because I looked around at Dreamforce in San Francisco every year and I was like, it's gonna take me a long time to get into those. Everyone's on the conference at Dreamforce, but the deals are happening
They're
in
in
different
hotel
places.
rooms, like up on the
Exactly. And
50th floor. Yeah.
I'm like, how do I get to be that guy? How do I be part of those conversations? And it's such a blessing that, and shout out to Canada because it's like, fuck, I wouldn't even be able to have this conversation hanging out with you and Courtney if it, wasn't for
Yeah.
this industry. So I got a lot of gratitude for it.
Yeah. That's great. All right. So let's try to get on topic, I guess. 'Cause we could talk
I
about the
digress a
cannabis
lot.
industry as a whole all day, but we're going to talk about retention as a whole, which is something we've been talking about a lot. And I think it's it's a discipline that does not get as much attention. It's starting to more now. We've been working in a
Mhm.
marketing function this whole time. So
Mhm.
talked to lots of operators, and the business is very difficult. A lot of people, almost no company has the marketing budget that they would want or should actually have for like an actual brand that they're trying to build.
Yep.
And so people are really heavily focused on winning new customers.
Mhm.
However, when you're in a saturated market, like California, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, um, the a lot of the marketing effort is actually better served at retention, which is something people are starting to learn.
Yeah,
It's easier to make more revenue from your existing customers, and it's easier to retain customers to get new ones.
absolutely.
Um, and so I'm excited that people are coming around to that fact because when you're running advertising, I've got a couple anecdotes I use a lot. One is that I try to refer to like large brands. Like if we look at like auto manufacturers, right? Like car
Mhm.
manufacturers, they intentionally set a large portion of their budget, maybe more than half of it, like BMW or Mercedes. They're not trying to get new customers at all. They're simply trying to reinforce the brand relationship with their existing customers so that when they go to purchase a new car, they're still relevant, right?
Yeah.
Um, but let's get into 420. We see 420 spikes every year, right? So our whole platform is measuring advertising to conversion. So you see the charts, you see Fridays are the most busy days, and then you see 420 as this like, tower in the year. Um, I would
Yeah.
say that the tower was like a little less pronounced this year
Yeah.
than in previous year. It feels like the spike was spread out a little bit over more days, is not as pronounced. But I mean, your platform is measuring this as well. I'd love to hear to the extent that you are allowed to and can share what you saw happen on 420.
Yeah, actually, I was gonna send you this, but we have a 420 report that we just released that kind of showed a bunch of different types of metrics, and I'd highly recommend. I don't want to talk too much about Blaze or be too much of a fanboy, but obviously that's my job as VP of growth, and that's one of the reasons I'm on here. And one of the
Yep.
interesting things was just kind of the AOV lifts, right? And we can track different types of channels like mobile app and things like that, and kiosk. And I think one key aggregate takeaway is that. Um, People are shopping through different channels, right? They're going through the kiosks, they're going through the mobile
Yep.
app, they're going online, right? And so the impact for that moving leading into 420 is that brands got to be able to have a uniform message, right, across all of their channels, because knowing that so many of these customers are coming from all these different places, and then be able to actually drive promotions and stack discounts and these types of things, because to your point, like some stats, I'm just looking here. It's like, there's a 56% increase on average order value, from things like AI recommendations, right? So, there's so many things, there's so many factors at play. And I think that the impact for the retailer is this is a 420 is a great time to also test your theories on what you're trying to do, and also get a better
Yeah.
sense of the 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 sample size of, like, hey, where are your customers actually shopping? Do your customers care about the displays, or are they just coming into the kiosks? There's this famous case study from McDonald's where um, McDonald's wanted to actually reduce labor, and so they introduced kiosks, right? And what they found through the kiosks is that because people didn't have the stress of like standing in line, like seeing like all the craziness happening, they could just go to the kiosk, take their time, get their fries, supersize them, whatever. It's like the basket size went up like crazy.
Yeah.
And so I think, in a very long-winded way, to answer your question, it's you know 420, obviously big holiday, big opportunity to test different components and different pieces, big opportunity to get data. And like, it's a great opportunity to your point, coming back to loyalty and retention, make sure that you're hitting all those customers on all those channels, and then bringing them into an arena where it's like, hey, how do I actually understand who my customer is, as a whole? Because if I can do that and I can piece together that data, and I can get a view of that, then I can actually market to them and drive some retention, and position the types of things that you want to position to them to get like a true lifetime value that's increasing and increasing and increasing. So long-winded but exciting day. So I needed to share some stats.
Yeah. And how do you see the retention curve change for like a big event like 420 versus the normal curve, right? So like we measure one of the things that we've started doing the last year is in not just looking at here's ad impressions and then here's purchases made from those
Yeah.
same devices, but looking at the entire customer history and saying what does ad exposure do for incrementality, meaning for your regular shoppers, right? This is about retention and then increasing your customer value. For people that shop once every 60 days, Ad Exposed has, X percentage, 20, 30% increased customer value, and
Yep.
also has the churn band is reduced, right? When you're advertising to people. How do you see that in both I'm going to like use two cohorts here, which we use a lot of, which is like frequent shoppers, so your
Yep.
regulars, versus people that you haven't seen in at least, let's say, 6 months that like just came in for 420. What kind of data points do you have on that behavior?
Lots, man. I mean, especially in like, I mean, POS as well. Like, you could start to actually, segment your customers within, those profiles, and then you can splice and dice even deeper, depending on, obviously frequency, gender, basket size, a variety of different components to slice and dice. I think the bigger, I think the interesting question is, it's like we can start to see like what retention means as we break it down. But it's like, what do you think the retailer thinks of as retention today? Are they, because a part of the challenge I see with growing orgs is that like there's different definitions of like retention and loyalty,
Yeah.
right? And it's interesting because now I'm on the other side. I take off my cannabis hat. Now I'm on the other side. My dad has a chain of pet stores, right? And so it's like a lot of the retail I've learned here, or like at TJX or whatever the case is, it's all very interestingly similar, but with different technologies and different, maybe different verbiages. But like retention and loyalty are two things I feel like we talk about all the time. But like, are we even talking the same language? So like, in your experience, what are retailers considering retention and or loyalty? And are retention and loyalty the same thing in your books?
I would say, well, the first answer to that question is it's wildly different, right? You've
So
got you've got such a spectrum of operators. Again, like you've got like a small operator with one or two stores, and then we have MSOs with like 50 stores, right? And so they're different organizations. They think about the numbers differently. I think that loyalty is easier for people to wrap their head around
Yep.
because it's a pretty simple, concept, and it's very measurable. Like, okay, we gave them points or whatever it is, and they come in and they redeem them. Retention is, unless you're really on top of your data, I think it's unfortunately one of the last things that people look at when they look at their marketing or they look at, their customer behavior. They look at, oh, how many new people did we get net new? What is our loyalty program doing? But there's this like middle child bucket of like your regular shoppers that are in there and they're a material amount of revenue, but they're not throwing off like a hot signal necessarily,
Yeah.
and you really have to spend some time to like tease the data out to understand what they're doing. But I think that's kind of like the meat of the sandwich.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a really good really good perspective. I think when I think about and when we think about retention, like one of the things we measure a lot is we try and measure is attach rate, right? Like what are they attaching? How many times are they, attaching the same thing plus another adding, to their basket? So I think a good measure of retention here is like for the customers that we see all the time, are they, or in the retail environment sees all the time, are they just, coming back on 420 and just trying to get, the 420 discount, right? Like, is that really going to move the needle? Or is it like, hey, it's 420, it's a holiday. Do I know this frequent customer's basket enough to know kind of like the components of the basket so that I can skillfully make sure that, my deductions or my 420 discounts actually end up, helping them spend more, buy more, try new products that they wouldn't necessarily like. That's what I think is a market success. Is like, is this enough of a trigger point to make my frequent shoppers actually want to explore more, try more, get out of their comfort zone versus just buying their like, weekly eighth or whatever the case is
Yeah.
kind of thing. And I think what's the capacity or like what's the spending band of your frequent customer is another one, right? Like the cats and dogs in a pet store, like how much is like what's like the actual band of like a cat owner because they're buying food consistently, like the little tins, versus what's the actual capacity of a dog owner who maybe is a little bit more inclined for an impulse buy and maybe doesn't want to try food or whatever the case is. So I think that's the indicator. and that's data I'm curious to look into. I'm going to send you this 420 report. I'd be
Yeah.
so interested in what you have to say, and maybe do a quick little LinkedIn live on kind of that report next time as well.
Yeah, I can go over some of our dashboard stuff that we've been looking at it as well. Seeing how the numbers change. I haven't really thought about this, but a pet store is not a bad analogy for a dispensary. You've got a similar type of mix of products
Yep.
with some frequent repurchases that are going to happen on a consistent basis, and then other things like accessories that are like, and that's we've talked a lot about merchandising this year on this podcast, and then coming down to like how do you put products that people are going to connect with in their path of purchase, right? Because you've got a set of customers that are
Nailed
going to
it.
come in,
Yep.
they're going to come in for their weekly eighth or whatever it is. Maybe they're going to try a different strain, but like, how do you make it easy for them to discover new things that they may connect with, right?
Right. Indigo does this so well, right? Like they do this so well. Like they have just a plethora of different things. And it's like, that I remember a significant change when I was working. So I grew up in working at TJX, Marshalls, Winners, et cetera. And I remember to this day, like there's not much, you're 17 years old and you're toiling around Winners, like folding clothes. There's not much you really like catches your eye. But I remember the moment where they changed from like a static checkout to like,
You got to go through that
you
like
gotta go
the
through the snake
aisles,
line.
right? Yeah.
You gotta go through that. And so my dad and I were just actually checking out one of the stores that he's opening up, and I've been screaming about the snake line in his one store, and I'm like, I can't. But it's like, okay, well, we got to remerchandise. Like that's a big endeavor after you've already created the store, right? It's like it's a change, right? So I'm curious from you, like, what were some of the best, digital or physical, displays that you saw across the space, or like, did you see any stores kind of for 420 doing anything out of the ordinary, maybe like a little shop, shop in a shop or anything like that? Like, what were some of the highlights of how did people take advantage of it from a marketing lens? Out of curiosity, if you have any examples, and it's okay if you don't.
Yeah, well, I've got a pretty specific lens because I we don't really deal with any of the physical stuff, right?
Of
So like
course, of
I
course.
mean, I go to dispensaries every once in a while, but I'm really just in the online world. And so at that point it comes down to like what is the offer that's
Yeah,
going to be in the ad, right? And then how does that tie into what happens at the store? And you probably see this data as well. Something that was interesting to discover that I didn't realize until we were pulling the data apart is there's well, first let's talk about the online ordering, right? Because everything we measure
yeah,
is the online orders. So the
absolutely.
disparity between retail locations of how much of their orders are online is vast. Like some have like 3% of their orders are online and some have like 70%,
Yep.
right? In terms of but what is interesting is when people place online orders, getting back to the merchandising concept, some stores do a lot better job of increasing the basket size of online orders, right? And that kind of comes down. You talk about the snake line a little bit, but it's like, okay, I went online because I know I want these edibles and these pre-rolls, and I ordered them, and then I went to the store to pick them up. Some stores are pretty good about increasing the basket size when they get to the store. Like, okay, here's your order, but like, where did you put the place to pick up the order? Right? Like, is it just right there, or is it like through some sort of snake line? Do you have to talk to someone? Is there, merchandising that you can do in between?
Yeah.
Um, but let me actually answer your question more directly. Usually with digital campaigns, it's going to be a combination of is a brand featured, right? And did you target that campaign to the right area? So I'll talk about California. That's where I live. We've been operating
Yep.
for a long time, and
That's
we
repla
work with some
that's
operators.
replacing face. Yeah.
We work with some operators that have full statewide distribution and have a lot of online orders. So one of the things that we have discovered is that even, and this is like kind of like going back to old school marketing, like just zip code targeting, like just
Yeah.
understanding the demographics of the zip code and which brands resonate in that zip code, and then choosing to run a promotion for your retail operation that features a brand that people in that zip code that'll move the needle like 30% on your ROAS, right? Because people are presented with hundreds of online ads every day, and if they see a brand that they like, you have a much better chance of them looking at it. And then you get the opportunity to tell them what your offer is. Are you giving them 25% off, 40% off, buy one, get one,
Totally.
whatever that is? So it's usually a combination of how did you do the targeting? What does the creative itself look like? Can you get someone's attention? And then what is the value that you're offering them?
Big time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, right? Like for it to be a digital day on 420. Like, I mean, like we're working with, to your point, like, Blaze has an amazing e-com. You know, we acquired Timber a few years ago, and
Yeah, those guys, I know
we
those guys. They're great.
yeah, we got a great engine. I was also a Dutchie for 2.5 years during the heyday of our e-com, and also helped launch Dutchie Plus. And so online is something that's near and dear to my heart as well. And the reason I ask is because it's interesting to see state by state, like to your point, the offers and the brands that are taking advantage of those. Couldn't agree more with the geofencing. From the consumer side, one of the things that we're starting to see is like, we there's some AI bud tenders out there as well, right? So it's like, hey,
Mhm.
to your point of basket size, we just released one called Herbie, and we saw a lot of data in terms of like increased AOV relative to stores that might not have that enabled. And one of the things we're flirting with right now is releasing set ad network, right? To your point. And so, question for you is, you must see a lot, like for that digital perspective to be truly like symbiotic between brand, retailer, and vis-a-vis customer that's actually checking out. Like the checkout process, like so many things have to go right, right? And I don't think a lot of people understand kind of like how many things have to go right in that process technologically.
Yeah.
And so, how are you finding the retailer and the brand's knowledge of how to really potentially, even if they don't work together, but how do you see like that path digitally? Do you feel like the industry is maturing and getting to a point where they're starting to really understand that and empower that, or is there like still a knowledge gap? Is effectively the question I'm trying to get to and ask.
There's a big knowledge gap still. We're still the cannabis industry as a whole is still operating from a marketing perspective in an incredibly fragmented way. Um, and there's reasons for that. There's good reasons for that. Like obviously you've got going back to the budget issue, like cash is just hard, right?
Mhm.
And marketing
Of course.
dollars are not write-offs, although they will be for medical now, so that's great.
There you go. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah, all of a
Medical
sudden
scheduling.
medical states just got a leg up.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, which is crazy. We had
the
a discussion on that this morning. More on that to come. But I'd love to drill in later on with
Yeah.
you.
Well, it's a thing, it's a big thing, right? So you
Huge.
have and then the other thing that is abnormal in cannabis is that brands can't sell to consumers directly, right? So that's not normal. Like it's not normal. Like even if a brand sells most of their stuff through a retail channel, let's say you're selling Bluetooth speakers, right? You're selling most of those through Best Buy or through Amazon. But you can go to JBL and Bose and you can like buy stuff from them. So and the reason that that's important is that if you're a brand and you're doing marketing, the marketing dollars that you're going to spend, they have to go to a third party, right? So when you spend
Yeah.
those dollars, not only do you not get to write them off, you then have to, the only channel is to send them to some retailer that you
Yeah.
generally aren't going to have a lot of control over the customer experience. And then when you bubble up those marketing dollars to your CFO and say, hey, I spent $50,000 or whatever it was, and then they say, well, what happened with that? Well, we had some lift in this store, right?
Yep.
And then someone's like, well, why are we spending our money to send people to the store? We don't have very much money to begin with. Let's focus on other channels. So we have been we have had limited success and we have been doing it for years. We have some retailers where we work directly with the retailer and the brand and we run co-marketing campaigns. That has been increasing, but is still like a shadow of what it is in every other industry. Like take supermarkets, for example. Like all the marketing that's happening in supermarket, you know this, you work in retail. Like those are all brand dollars. The
Yep. Of
the supermarket's
course.
not spending any dollars, right? So the brand is spending the dollars, but it's inverted for the most part in cannabis, where the retailers are the ones that are doing all the marketing, and
Yeah. Yeah.
right, and then so and then
Crazy.
it should be coming from the brand, but the mechanism to do that just hasn't been in place. When we do it, it works very well. Like we just ran some campaigns in California. They were straight co-marketing campaigns. And then one of the ways we've done it is working through the retail channel and basically carving out part of the because most brands do have a marketing budget with the retailer, but the majority of it is being used for discounts, right? So the brand comes in and says, I'm going to just subsidize the cost of my product and you're going to promote it, and then that's going to be the marketing budget. That's
Yeah.
like the lever that works and people do a lot of.
Yeah.
But we ran actual digital co-marketing campaigns for the brand. And like we just did this for four brands on this retailer, and all four of those brands had like their best months ever. It's just that getting the parties to work together has been a struggle, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, in we should maybe we'll take this offline, but we got an amazing ad network launching, and one of the things I've kind of been running into is this exact thing is like there's this massive knowledge gap, and so I wanted to ask you if it was only me who's recognizing that, and so yeah, man, it's there's room for a lot of knowledge. There's room for, attribution is such an interesting thing, especially to talk about in a boardroom. But it's
Yeah.
like so necessary. It's like, again, goes to show you. I mean, like the data, going back, looping all around. It's like the data goes to show you where people are shopping. Like there's a
Yeah.
there, so you
We'll
gotta
we'll do
understand.
a follow-up conversation. I'll show you because that's our whole thing is attribution, right? Because otherwise it doesn't work. But
Of
we
course.
are I'm guilty of this, and now I found a kindred spirit. We are terrible at staying on topic. So
Okay.
uh, well, I think the
Yeah.
conversation is interesting, but Courtney's going to get mad at me because we're supposed to be talking about
Did you say they're
retention
gonna be
strategies for people. Let's talk about strategies. How do we give
they're
people
gonna be
some
backstage? Okay.
advice on retention for new and reactivated customers that have come in? You've got they've come into your store. You have a touch point with them. They have a product they've bought. They're probably going to like it because it's cannabis, and most of the products are pretty good at this point.
Okay.
What do you do to get them to come back?
Gosh, it's such a good question. I'll start very trivially. First of all, you have to get their phone number and their email.
Yeah,
That's number one. I mean, it's such a funny question because it's like, oh, I'll get their phone number and their email, but I've literally seen it. It's like it's one thing if you're an owner to get someone's phone number and email, but it's another thing to get, a bud tender $22 an hour or whatever the case is, or if that's even the rate, to get an email and maybe one time, hey, you're in the store, get that email, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a whole other thing to grab that, and so that's actually a massive problem. You multiply that by 10, 20, 30 stores, and like all of a sudden, like that, unless your training program's dialed, even the fact of the matter is if you don't have that phone number and email, but you're saying frequent, so you got them to come back. They, you built a relationship with them. The second thing, to your point, is understanding the data on that customer to create a profile on that customer that you can actively drip, nurture different promos. A couple of different companies do this really, really well. Also, a lot of illicit market delivery companies do this really, really well as well, which is
yeah,
fascinating. I wrote this whole piece on like the shadow market and like sophistication between the regulated market and this market. And so the second thing is you can't do anything to actually drive them back onto any of your channels in store or online unless you actually understand a couple key points, and you can put those points together. I think now what's interesting about AI, especially with some of the AI coming out and some of the point of sales and things like that, it's like you can actually start to ask, similar to how you ask GPT, Claude, et cetera. I'm sure you already know this, but we have something coming out at Lighthouse, and you can actually ask Lighthouse how exactly you would start to create promos and bundles based on these different frequency touch points, times a day, things like that. So that's number two. I think going back to your point, retention versus loyalty, I think the difference between it is retention, you're proactively kind of reaching out. Loyalty, it's like they're, retroactively reaching out. It's like you're not having to take an action to get with them. And so I think that piece is like make sure you're marketing them things that they actually care about, at the time of day that they care about, and the frequency that they care about it. And so you know this, but actually getting that profile is much more than knowing like what their dog's name is, right? It's those buying behaviors, attributions. It's understanding who's within their shopper profile. Like, are they coming in with a spouse? Are they coming in, who are they coming in with as well? Because a big portion of this is also like, the attribution of the person that you're consistently doing this with, right? So from a profile perspective, that's exactly what I would suggest. And the third thing is you got to hit them on the channels at which they're operating on, but also introduce them to new channels. So again, how do you create a moment or a thing that enables them to, um, you know, for because those customers, like, you effectively want to make them evangelists, and if you can get them to create a buying habit or behavior or condition them to come into the store, use the kiosk, whatever the case is, shop online, delivery. There's a store in Canada, in Toronto, 1922. They went to a full delivery model, and so it's like, hey, how do I turn all my customers into making sure that they understand they can only run delivery through me because my unit economics are better on delivery. And so I think it's using those customers, once you know they're loyal, to make sure that they're evangelists and also bring customers back into the store. I know Media Gel is obviously a digital platform, but I'm a huge fan of in real life. I just
Yep.
posted about this. Anthropic just hired, like a head of in real life, and like I'm a big like COVID, was a crazy time, and so one thing I'm trying to do, even at my dad's store, because this conversation is pertinent to me as a VP of growth for retailers, but also as a retailer kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I'm really trying to do is like everyone who bought above a certain threshold, let's say, above their basket size, at during 420, it's like, hey, can I get them back into a store and recreate that memory of 420, or recreate that feeling of a good deal or a good sale? And can I, make them meet each other, right? If I can create a community, those people are more likely to just come back together or talk about me in WhatsApp groups or in Facebook groups, or they're going to give me Google reviews. And so that's kind of the last thing, is it's like the way I get them to come back into store is like incentivize them with some Google reviews. It's like, can you please give me a Google review? And X amount off on the way back, or you get a special perk or whatever the case is. But those would be kind of the 3, 4 ways, and in real life, mixed with digitally serving them at the right time is obviously important.
Yeah. That's great. I want to circle back to capturing the contact information, which I think people like intuitively understand that they should do that. But if you were to put a number on it, let's say that a new customer comes in that hasn't been in the store before. They're not in your system, and they're going to purchase and they're going to spend, let's say, $100. And you're doing promos, so your total margin on them is maybe 30%, right?
Okay.
Where it would normally maybe be 50 or 60, but let's say it's 30%. So now you have $30
Which is
of
still a good margin for cannabis.
still a good margin for cannabis. Okay, well, let's say $20. Okay.
Okay.
All right, let's say it's $20 now of like actual margin dollars, which is another thing we can talk about as a shortcut to measuring some things. But you've got 20 margin dollars on $100 of revenue. And you have an option to lose lose some of your margin in order to capture their contact information, right? So if you were to put a number and say, like, is it worth $5 to the retailer to say, over the year or lifetime value of the opportunity cost to be able to reactivate that customer?
No, no. I
No?
don't so. I don't think it's worth five. I don't. $5 is a lot. Like, is it a one and done? Either I capture them this time and like maybe forever lose them kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
It's
Let's
like,
it's got a hypothetical scenario. So like it's you're gonna pay $5 for the opportunity to be able to contact them in the future, and maybe you've got a what is your percentage? Maybe you have a 30% chance of them coming back in and capturing another $20 of revenue. So there's a lot of math, and this is obviously like a
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
of
a
course.
myopic
Great,
hypothetical situation, but
great question. um,
the answer doesn't matter as much as the question, actually, right? So it's a forcing function to the reason that I asked the question is yes, it's important to capture customers and their contact information, But if you try to put dollars on it, all of a sudden it makes you reframe the way that you think about it, which is like,
Right.
okay, there's a hard monetary value to getting contact information because it is a number greater than zero opportunity that you're going to be able to get them again, and you might not be able to if you don't ever email them again. Like I'm sure I personally have bought a product before where I signed up for something and they have my email address and I didn't really want it then. And I probably got like 20 emails over a year that I ignored, but they got me at the right time with the right thing. And I was like, oh, you know what? I actually do want that. Right. Which is an opportunity that will never exist if you weren't interesting enough in the first place to like be stuck in the memory, right? Without
Right.
a prod.
And- Yeah, man, then that would be my answer. It's like if I gotta pay people to want to communicate with me, um, and and there's only a 30% chance that they're gonna communicate with me.
Yeah, well, I just
I'm,
made those numbers up.
no,
Like,
no,
yeah,
and what I'm saying is like this fundamentally goes back to how I look at retail as a whole. And I know retail is obviously very transactional in a lot of ways, but if we're talking about frequency and we're talking about lifetime value, it's really not that transactional, right? Over a period of time. And so um, I can only tell you from the way I look at retail at Pet Planet, which, like we said, we liken to very similar to the cannabis industry, which I think the cannabis industry is a little bit, different consumer, right? A little
yeah,
wider range. Like there's some differences for sure. But the way I look at it is I want that person to want to hear from me. I want that person to believe that the value I'm delivering in my emails, whether it's offers, also comes with, the idea that I'm helping them buy, right? And this is something that I see all the time in the pet store. Is like everyone cares about pet longevity. I'm a dog dad. I have a dog of 4.5 years. He has Addison's disease. I don't know how to buy all these 1,700 SKUs, but I do know that there's some things in here that I'm looking for that I don't even know I'm looking for, but I'm looking, right? Especially if it has to do with the the longevity of my dog, and so I'm more apt because that to me is an inelastic good in a way for frequent customers. I love airlines, by the way, and loyalty in airlines. Maybe a different
oh yeah.
conversation, but I think that it also depends on, the type of customer that you have. You also want the right customer. If I have 10,000 emails, but I have five opens, it's like, fuck, I'm doing something wrong. I'm not reaching them, or, whatever the case is. So I think, you know what, Jake? I think no, man. I
You're not going to give them a
count
$5
me out for
discount?
that. I'm not giving
Okay.
up my margin for emails right now because I want to be providing a service. I want them to want to fucking talk to me and come back and be like, damn, that's why a dealer is such an interesting thing in the illicit market, right? Yes, the dealer controls distribution, but if you like your dealer, it's like it's a special thing, right? It's a
Yeah,
special
yeah.
thing. I was just in Barcelona. I just saw this, right? Like I just
Yeah.
saw this in play. So I think there's traditional means to retail still existing on those structures. But like, yeah, man, at the end of the day, I want someone to want to buy from me. And if they don't want to fucking come into the store, awesome. Don't care if they're a loyal customer. If they want to buy online, guess what? I'm going to deliver and they're going to get the same brand promise and it's going to be uniform across my whole experience. Doesn't matter what channel you get me on.
All right.
But I'm not paying you for your email because I'll probably find it anyways.
All right, you're sticking to your principles. I like it.
What about you? What would you do? What's your answer to that?
I would say that with with the right data analysis, like if you understood your data well enough and you understood like you wouldn't I wouldn't recommend doing it if you didn't have the corpus of data to do it, but there and if you are a business that is looking at for some businesses like 5%, 10% more sales is going to be the difference for
For
them
sure.
than like succeeding or not or like paying their rent. And so if you can say,
Yeah,
I know my open rate is this, I know that my conversion rate is that, and I know that if I offer someone an extra pre-roll that costs me 50 cents, and I used a higher number, but
for sure.
there's a numerical path where it makes sense.
I'll give you an example, okay? And so, like 100% there's a numerical path, especially if those 30% opens lead to 20% conversions.
Yeah.
20% of those conversions have a delta or deviation of like umpteenth percent. Then it's like, oh shit. Then it's like amazing. This works because I'll find a diamond in a haystack, right? I'll give you an example. This lady at Pet Planet, same thing. Like she came in, she bought like $1,000 worth of food at one time. We were like, holy shit, like no one's doing that, right? And it's like, okay, is it worth like the needle in the haystack mentality relative vis-a-vis our like cost acquisition, right? Obviously.
Yeah.
So
I would actually,
it's a good
the
point.
scenario that I was thinking about was less, I like the needle in the haystack and more small incremental gains in terms of kind of the sweeping the stuff that's fallen off the table, right?
Yeah,
Like you have customers that fall off the table and like, can you sweep some of them back on the table?
big time.
So
Big
there's a lot
time.
of hypotheticals in there though.
No, I get it. And I actually had a story before I started talking to you about the other story that you would have really liked, and now I've forgotten it. So great hypothetical question. I love that. I think just to close the loop on it, yeah, it's really got to depend on the cost acquisition relative to the increase in the delta and like over a
Yeah.
given period of time. Like, is that 30 years? Is that like a 30-year depreciation or like what is what is that?
Yeah.
But it's a
I
good
it's one of
point.
my favorite sort of mental exercises is like looking at null hypothesis, right? And
Yep.
looking at, okay, there's a non-zero factor here. If you think about the scenario that you create, how big is it away from zero, right?
I remember what I was going to tell you. So at Lift and Co., one of the things that we really wanted, so we had launched a data program. Okay, you're going to love this. So the idea behind what I went to do there, real quick for contextual sake, was Lyft was this trade show and this like website, this like Yelp type website. But then obviously we had a ton of data, right? And so we started to package our data out. And one of the things we wanted to collect was we wanted to understand buyer behavior from the first 25 dispensaries in Toronto, right? And so one of the ways in which we were doing, which was horrendous, now that I look at the P&L and the unit economics, is we were paying $5 per receipt. Okay, $5 per receipt, and what we started to see was, a lot of people are gamifying the receipts, like et cetera, et cetera, and so like our cost of acquisition
Yeah.
ballooned, right? And like we hadn't had enough information or data amongst all the SKUs that we could actually draw patterns and package that up from a data perspective. So our CAC ballooned, and we're like, holy shit, like we need to rejig the return. So one of the things we realized instead was we started giving points. We started contesting it, right? And contesting it was way cheaper with way more yield, right? Hey, you have a chance to win an all-inclusive vacation in Mexico if you upload your receipt, which cost us like 4 grand
Yeah.
versus like 4 grand divided by $5. That's like whatever amount of receipts that is, kind of thing, right? So to your point, the math has to math, but different ways of trying shit for sure. And I think the most important thing is you think about these questions as a retailer and ask yourself these like, hey, what's my loyalty program actually going to cost me, right? Like what's the cost behind all the
Yeah.
actions that I'm trying to do to drive retention and loyalty? Because everything has a cost associated with it, especially when you're trying to get that customer back or acquire them.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why all successful loyalty programs use points generally instead of dollars, right? Because you are at that point in printing your own currency and you have currency control at that point in terms of what it's redeemable for.
Yeah, big time. Again, asking in aggregate, but any examples of some like great loyalty programs you've seen across the space, or maybe even across the space? Like, do you have a favorite loyalty platform in general? Like, even not in cannabis. What's like speaking of loyalty, I always love to bring in other industries, and so it's like, what does loyalty mean in the regular sense of the word in other industries? And are there any platforms that you like abide by? I know people love Delta,
Yeah.
or so what would you have to say there?
I mean, I'm on there's a couple cults I got sucked into years ago. For sure, Amex is one. They've got me locked in pretty good.
Nice,
Um,
naturally.
Marriott acquired my attention when they bought Starwood.
Yep,
And so, that's a good example. So Marriott's a perfect example of because I travel a fair amount and I almost have lifetime platinum status, not quite. Um, but I have definitely made decisions to choose to stay in a Marriott property over like what was probably a less expensive, cooler boutique hotel in the
Yeah.
same place I needed to be in because I wanted to check the box on my number of stays in a year, right?
For the future game. Yeah, that's incredible. They do a really good job of that. They do a really good job of
Yeah,
that. And it's like, why
they've done a very
Marriott?
good job of that.
So just really quickly, just on this note, and I'm not trying to, digress us by any means, but it's an interesting point. So it's like, okay, but there's a ton of different loyalty programs for hotels, right? There's Club Accor, like shout out to the Fairmont, right? Like, and so Marriott not only had to capture you in some way, they had to, give you the ability to choose from a certain set of things, and they had to be so much better. They had to hook you in such a way that like other programs didn't matter anymore, right? And I think with cannabis, like you got a retailer, like in New York, you have 600 retailers. There's retailers across the street from each other, right? All these different places. And so it's like, is the loyalty program enough in cannabis today to make you not want to go somewhere else and be um, proactive about the fact that no, I'm coming to this place? Like, do you believe the loyalty programs are there right now? Obviously, varying states can do varying loyalty programs, and it differs and things like that. But do you believe loyalty is in cannabis from a retail perspective today, and or a brand perspective?
I think I don't, it's a big space, so someone may have done this, but I would say the thing that I haven't seen a cannabis loyalty program do effectively is reward someone for long-term status in a meaningful way.
Great
Yes,
point.
you get points, like, okay, you get points and you can redeem those for dollars. But what Marriott has done very well, and Amex to a certain extent, which is they put you in tiers, right? And your history of loyalty with them puts
Yeah,
you in different tiers. So, like, when I check into a Marriott hotel at this point, like, I get a free room upgrade, usually, if there's one available, without having to pay anything, which doesn't actually cost them anything because it's a empty room anyway. They're just putting me from one room to another room. But I'm incentivized as a customer to continue to use that loyalty program because that loyalty program compounds over time,
good
if
point.
that makes sense.
Of course, man.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, compounding is the secret that no one ever tells you about, right? So it's actually a really, really interesting perspective
Like,
because it's
why
like
is there not like
I don't think I've seen that either.
a, pick a brand that's in a lot of states, like, I don't know, it's DZ or Cookies or, well, Cookies got their own problems, but, and why is there not like a gold card for that? Like, you get the silver card, gold card, your platinum card, your super VIP card or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that, I think if you have that, if and you want to capture a national audience and you want to be a brand that when I go to New York, I go to New York pretty frequently. If I go to New York, the what you want to combat as a brand is someone going, "Oh, I'm going to try out this new thing because want to see what they have to offer." You want them to be like, "Oh, I need to go to my store because I need to keep racking up my points and my status."
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's also that also leads into the fact that like that's actually how a lot of brands should try and really educate retailers on like brands shouldn't try and be in every store as well. And that's like kind of like goes back to that education gap, which is like retailers and brands have the capacity to actually work together to build that, because the big thing is like I don't not only, I want the loyalty program to incentivize me not to go anywhere else, but if I do go to that other place, I just can't get that. I can't get that baby Jeter. I can't get that Stizzy, right? And I don't know if I see a lot of that, like a lot of those exclusive drops or, things like that. And that's another way to create momentum and to create loyalty and advocacy and evangelism, especially if they're getting
Yeah.
access to that all the time. So yeah, man, really, really, really good point. I love the point about the compounding over time and what that time is. I think that's a great point in terms of loyalty today that I'm not seeing, because I can tell you I smoke Stizzies and Baby Jeters, and between the two,
David Jeter's pretty good.
nothing
Yeah.
nothing's holding me either. I mean, they're both great. Like they're both great, and
Yes, Easy has good products. I've
yeah, I like
Those are
both
great. I
brands.
mean, those are both brands that we do work with those brands. So I'm
I
biased, but
Amazing,
they're
man.
good people and they're good
I
products.
I don't do any work with either of those teams, and as a consumer, like they're great brands, great products. Like I love the Jeter. Jeter speaks to me a little bit more because I love their apparel. I also love, obviously the team over there, but like, if I'm removing myself and just putting myself in a consumer perspective, it's like they got some sweet apparel, they got a great brand, right? They do a lot of great stuff. Big
Yeah,
fan,
I
especially
got
World Cup. World Cup's coming up. I'm a
my
soccer
Jeter hat
player.
right here. There you go.
There you go. There
See,
you
I have my
go.
Jeter hat right here. The Jeter
Oh
loves
man.
you.
I love that. Shout out
Yeah.
Jeter. You boys are and the teams are killing it. But yeah, I mean, like the World Cup's coming up, and it's massive. And one of the only brands I actually see taking advantage of it is Jeter, right? Like even me as a pet store owner now, I'm thinking about like, hey, how do I get some onesies for different countries, things like that. It's like I think there's so much opportunity for brand loyalty. I also think stickiness with being a first mover matters as a brand in terms of retention and loyalty, right? Like people hate to change. I always say this, and I mean, people hate the burden of change. I work in POS, right? Like people want to change their whole system, and it's like people are emotionally tied to brands the same way, right? Oh, that was the first store in my town or my county. That's the first brand I smoked. Like I'm more apt to try them. So it's like if you already got them, to your point. You gotta keep them. You gotta keep them. There's too many switching. If they switch, they're not going to switch again. Like the switching costs are a burden for sure.
Yeah. We're just about up on time. Let's go. I'm gonna try to answer at least one of these questions here that Courtney put together for us. Let's do with this one, which is based on everything you've seen, like this year, last year. What do you think the biggest missed opportunity is in cannabis retail when it comes to retention and long-term growth for this cohort of like customers that come in on a special day,
Well, I think the
other than
biggest
not
missed
getting their contact information? We know that.
that is a big missed opportunity. Um, for the retailer or for the consumer, for the retailer, effectively, right?
For retailers, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of missed opportunities. I think, I gotta say, like, I think knowing when to consolidate or knowing, when to buy is a big missed opportunity. I think the markets are moving right now, and I think if you have a
Wait, wait.
really good,
What do you mean by that exactly? Like consolidate
so
what?
so I think if you're transparently, I think if you're a retailer, you know that there's externalities pushing the market to a place where there's crazy things, pricing compressions happening. There's more saturation in your environment. All these different things are happening, and so I think the biggest opportunity that's missed for a cannabis retailer actually is the inability to potentially zoom out and consider what does the next 2 or 3 years in this market look like. How am I going to compete and how am I going to continue to drive my margins or hold my margins if a store opens up across the street? How do I ensure that I'm creating leverage in buying power if I'm only just one or two stores? How do I make sure that I'm creating an environment where I'm like constantly like monitoring labor and constantly trying to, obviously trying to overtrend positive trend in revenue. Because here's the thing, it's like what cannabis market in your state or your country or your state or your province could look like today might be a lot different than tomorrow. And if you're not zooming out and considering, hey, like what does the next 1, 2, 3 years look like? Then you can't actually understand what a good deal looks like either way, whether you're looking to acquire or consolidate. The reason I'm saying this is because I actually co-founded a company in Canada called CanAcquire, and the market multiples change so much, and by the time somebody looks and says, hey, fuck, like I just lost 20% of my revenue year over year from things I couldn't control. Gas prices are going up, people aren't buying as much cannabis, right? Like all these different things. If you don't proactively think about, hey, like what's my exit or my next move, you're gonna make that move when it's almost too late or it's gonna be reactive. And so, Courtney, great question. And maybe you weren't expecting this answer, but I think the biggest missed opportunity is cannabis retailers are so focused in the inertia of the day to day that sometimes they're not thinking about the moves that are out there and proactively addressing what those paths are so that I can get my 4 times EBITDA multiple and all my inventory sold and because it's within 6 months. Or it's like, hey, maybe I got to go buy the person beside me or build a partnership so I can be stronger. So that would be my answer. I hope that's an all right answer, but
No,
that's
I
my
like
answer.
that. No, it is the answer. The answer is stop worrying about 420 and think about the long-term strategy of your business.
Or 20, I mean, look, like I'll give you an example. Like I told you I came back to Toronto to help my dad with his pet store. And it's like I went into a store in Ajax and I was like Ajax, Ontario. I was like, did anyone give a shit about 420? And they were like, over here, no. Like we had sales, like there's like no. And so yeah, I think in aggregate, 420 increased it. But do I think 420 is the sell of the year? No, I think there's other sales. I think there's Valentine's Day. Like I think there's the holidays. Like I think
Yeah.
there's like Valentine's Day, everybody. Like that's a fucking like that's a holiday. Like that's like no matter who you are, you know about Valentine's Day. So, anyways, that would be my final thoughts. There's other sales outside of 420. To your point.
All right, great. Well, we're up on time here. We need to do the standard wrap up of Shabazz. I know you do a couple different things. We're here
Yep.
talking about e-commerce primarily, but how can people get a hold of you if they are interested in some of the things you talked about? Like, for example, if they need some dog food, they can go to the pet food store. No,
You can definitely, but
because
you can
you
find us
did mention that
online.
you got some round. What's that?
I said you can find us online. We got a great web presence. So there you go.
Yeah. What is it called again?
It's
The
called
pet
Pet
store?
Planet. It's called Pet Planet. Pet Planet, but it's
Pet
only
Planet. Okay.
yeah, it's in Canada. And so where
Yeah.
can people find me, or what were you? Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah. Where can people find you? You mentioned you've got your Can Acquire. Obviously, the Blaze is your main thing you're doing, but
Yep. So, real quick, thanks, Jake. It was a great conversation, and honestly, we weren't going to stick to the script. I know we weren't. I looked you up before, and I just had a feeling you and I are going to go in so many different directions. So, I appreciate your knowledge, and I appreciate your critical thinking, and some of the things that we chatted about. Real quick, yeah, I'm the VP of Growth at Blaze. I'm in New York. I also run a group called the New York Cannabis Collective. We're having a summer retreat June 18th. So, if you're in New York City, we go upstate to Woodstock and we have an amazing retreat. It's executive leadership retreat. It's typically VP, owner, operator, C-level, and it's in Woodstock. It's amazing. Check us out, www.thecannabiscollective.org. I also have Canacquire.io. That's a Canadian M&A firm. Check that out. Shout out to my boy Chris Lomax, who crushes that and is our head of corporate development. And then finally, I have a newsletter, a leadership newsletter that really doesn't have anything to do with much to do with cannabis. Has everything to do with learning, retail, SaaS, hiring people. Things I learned in the airport. It's called Polaris Perspective. So www.readpolarisperspective.com. And then of course. I also have a YouTube channel, so hit me up on YouTube, Shabazz Karavarani. Thanks, Jake. Appreciate the time, man.